All right, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Dillon Breen. I'm the president of the Livonia Republican Club. And extraordinary guest, Senator Patrick Colbeck, candidate for governor and our local state senator. The format today is going to be an open questions. We're going to start by asking questions to Senator Colbeck. He's on a time schedule and needs to travel to Traverse City later in the day. So without further ado, if you have any questions for Senator Colbeck, feel free to ask them, and we'll have a conversation here in an open and free manner.
We'll
just start off with the opening address.
Sure. Well, I'm a little bit more casual than usual, as those of you in the district know, because we're heading up north and I'm going to be on another road tour. Just got back from Holland, Michigan last night and Grand Rapids area, so we're getting a pretty good tour of the state. And the great news is we've gotten great feedback for our Principled Solutions tour, and that's what we're talking about. You guys have had me as your state senator, so you know what I've been fighting about. But there's a lot of folks in the state that are not that aware of what we've been doing on their behalf, and we're getting the word out to them, and it's been resonating. Just some good news on the campaign front. The last 3 straw polls we've had in our election, we've got 75% or more of the vote. And that's from, organizations like the 14th Congressional District, the Michigan Conservative Coalition, my alma mater, the University of Michigan. That's a big deal, but those are where we're known, where people actually know what we've been up to, focusing on their best interests instead of the special interests in Lansing. And so the goal is to let the rest of the state know about what we've been up to and how, sometimes we get really frustrated with the service that they're getting from public servants. So that's why messages like Drain the Swamp and Make DC Listen resonated in the last presidential election. When they find out that I've actually been fighting on their side against things like the gas tax, things like the Medicaid expansion, things like the senior pension tax, and they find out that I don't just oppose them, but provide alternative solutions that prioritize their best interests, it resonates. And everybody that's here today, I appreciate anything you can do to share the word, because we all have friends and family all across the state. Anything you can do to just share a track record and say, guys, here's what we've been working on, and there actually is somebody who's listening to us and working on our behalf up there, and we'd like them to be the next governor. So if you want more information, please go to colbeckforgovernor.com, and also put in a bid on the financial side of the fence. We've actually, if you text ROCKET to 91999, you can actually contribute to our campaign. This is a grassroots effort. $10,000 $10 donations equals $10,000 donations. So anything you can do to help would really be appreciated. I want to thank all of the folks that are here as supporters here for this event too. It's been a great grassroots campaign, and in a couple weeks we're going to be filing all of our signatures to be on the ballot. And unlike any other gubernatorial campaign in memory, we are going to be doing it without paying anybody to gather the signatures. This is a pure grassroots effort. Over 500 people across the state have helped us get those signatures on the ballot, and then some. And a lot of those folks are sitting in this room, and I appreciate it, but this is a big deal. This is different than all the other campaigns. They have to pay people to do that. So when you look at campaign balances, you can either raise money to go off and pay somebody to gather signatures, or you can serve in a manner that actually gets enough people excited to spend their Saturdays instead of watching football games, going off and gathering petition signatures for you, and that's what we've done. So please check out colbeckforgovernor.com, and anything you can do to help there would be most appreciated.
Thank you, Senator. We'll open the floor to any questions or comments. Good discussion rolling here. Don't feel shy.
Senator, what are your top 3 priorities as governor?
Top 3 priorities, number 1, are eliminate the state personal income tax. And, President Reagan once talked about bold colors versus pale pastels. Well, I'm in bold colors mode. That's why I led the effort to make Michigan a right-to-work state, and that's what turned around our economy here in the state. And so, 0.3% reduction in personal income tax, okay, fine, that's nice. I mean, how many people are going to go rah-rah and get out to the polls for the general election because their candidate's going to eliminate or reduce the personal income tax by 0.3%? I'm not seeing a lot of signs or bumper stickers saying, hey, vote for that 0.3% reduction. I've actually got a practical, milestone-based approach to go off and do that. The other thing we're going to be pushing for are the broad-based economic development incentives. So right now we spend about $1 billion on MEDC and Michigan Strategic Fund. Essentially, it's a slush fund for the state to play venture capitalist. My approach is fundamentally different. I say that the key to economic development, much like I would have did with Right to Work, was focusing on what's in the best interest of the people we're serving. And if you lower the total cost of government by eliminating the state personal income tax, if you lower the cost of health care, which I've promoted all across our state, matter of fact, I've promoted all across the country. This past week, I actually testified in Wisconsin in support of direct primary care legislation that could lower the cost of health care by over 20% while improving the quality of care. And you lower the cost of energy by promoting electric choice by over 20%. The people that have choice in our market, which is only 10% of our market, thanks to regulations up in Lansing, they're going to get over 20% less on their electricity. So from a business perspective, if I lower the cost of government, I lower the cost of health care, I lower the cost of electricity, I've lowered the total cost of doing business, Michigan becomes a destination state for businesses of all shapes and sizes. Small, medium, large, data centers, film industry, whatever. We don't care anymore because we're not picking winners and losers. So that's a big thing. Repealing Common Core is another area that I really am passionate about, as well as these enhanced Michigan education savings programs. I want to make sure that they're successful as we deploy it. It's a way to get more money into schools without increasing taxes and by putting the parents in greater control over how those educational funds are expended. So those are a few of the big ones, but I'm a policy wonk, so we got a lot of stuff we're going to be working on. As governor, one of the key things that I'm going to be focused on is performance-based budgets too, and which is what I did as the chair for the State Police and Department of Military and Veteran Affairs budgets. We turned around the performance of those organizations significantly by holding them accountable for the money that we're giving them. And if you do that across the board in state government, you're going to see some people restoring respect to our system of government, and Michigan will be the model for the rest of the nation.
Is there an opportunity that all of the candidates running for governor would be able to get together and debate, or at least in the same venue?
Yeah, it would be nice. We've, the Lieutenant Governor's interested, Dr. Hines is interested, Attorney General thinks he's already anointed for that post, so he's not interested in talking to people. And if he's afraid of talking to fellow Republicans, I'd hate to think of what he's going to be doing with Democrats. So that's the area where we're struggling right now. He hasn't engaged, and he's calling it a gimmick to actually talk to the people that are interviewing him for his job. And I think that's a bad way to start off with your prospective boss.
Any other questions?
Senator, one of the things that bothers me is what they call Sharia law,
Yeah.
and the supplementing of our government, our law. Is there anything you can say about that?
Well, Constitution is the supreme law of the land, so the idea of subverting it with another form of law is not something that's consistent with the system of government we've set up. We have to respect freedom of religion, but we also have to understand that we have a different basis of laws. We prioritize the value of all people being equal. And Sharia law, fundamentally, there's three classes of citizens. You've got male Muslims, you've got female Muslims, and you've got kafirs, or people of the book. That's a different class structure. And I don't support that. And people that are promoting that ideology need to reconsider where they're living, because this is not a place where we believe that people have different status based on their religious affiliation. We have freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, as well as some people would like to say. But in this case, we need to respect the fact that we have certain principles that we hold dear here in America, and we need to adhere to them. And I'm proud to have sponsored legislation around FGM legislation, female genital mutilation bill that got passed into law, to happen right down the street here in Livonia. That practice where these Somali family was coming was from Minnesota, and one of the doctors we had in our own community was performing that procedure. And it has a basis. I mean, some people are saying, oh, it's just cultural, it's not anything to do with religious. No, it's not. There is a religious predisposition to female genital mutilation, and it's something that we need to be clear about and say that is not acceptable in our community.
Thank you. Before we go on, there's a few people out here I'd like to recognize. Mayor Dennis Wright,
Hey.
Councilman Scott Power, and Councilman Brian Beacon. My question is, what's your position on Line 5?
Well, it's so close to Livonia, so it's obviously a pressing problem for the people in this room, I understand. There's two different approaches on Line 5. Number one, if you recognize that the people that are receiving the oil and gas that come from Line 5 actually need that supply, if you want to go off and shut down that supply line, are you just asking them to bang rocks together to make fire? I mean, is that what you're really trying to do? Are you to try to deny them with access to the same resources that the rest of us enjoy? And if you're saying, no, I think they actually do need that supply, then you go, all right, well then what's the most reliable way of actually getting that oil and gas to them? And as an engineer who helped design life support system on space station, and a lot of the equipment that I worked on was actually piping and plumbing, which I've got friends here that are very good experts at that as well. They'll tell you that the most reliable part of any system is the piping. So we could sit there and say shut down line 5 and then transport it via truck or transport it via rail or transport it via tankers, but you know what? There's a lot of bad things that can happen if you transport it that way. It's much more likely of having an accident with those approaches than having a very simple pipeline that just takes oil and gas from point A to point B. So if there's malfeasance associated with the maintenance of those pipes, by all means, we need to hold them accountable and make sure that those lines are repaired. But if people are objecting to them just because they're pipes, I mean.
Well, I think a big part of the argument around Line 5 has been that this pipeline has been there since the Mackinac Bridge was built in the
Yep.
50s. Many portions of this pipeline have fallen into ill care. They're not properly, it's not properly maintained by Enbridge, and there's a lot of oversight issues on an old pipeline. What are your thoughts on potentially requiring Enbridge, state of Michigan, to continue their lease members, to require them to build a whole new pipe, whole new state-of-the-art pipeline to replace the old one?
Well, you've been following my politics here in state government. You know I'm all about the mandates on business, right? No. This is a case where we want responsible, stewardship of resources and make sure we're responsible for the what is going on in our community, that they're responsible for all the citizens of Michigan. But, we can't get in the mode of mandates. And if this is a case where they have been held negligent on their maintenance, well, then you find out what current statute is out there. If they violated it, you implement the penalties, you enforce the rule of law. But you don't go off and make up a law on the outside if there is nothing existing and just say, because there's a lot of people that don't like pipes under the Straits of Mackinac, we're going to go off and penalize. That is a bad precedent for us to set. We have a legal system for a reason. We're supposed to go off, and if somebody is breaking the law, you go out and enforce the law. If people are upset about something happening that hasn't actually led to any problems or anything like that, and they're actually complying with the law, well, we've got to show some respect for what's already in place, and we can't be ruling by emotion. We got to be ruling by the facts and the
But if the
data.
tenets of the public trust aren't maintaining their due diligence and what they've been granted, and that there's an actual risk of, say, a spill from poor maintenance of this, shouldn't it be incumbent upon the state to take action to prevent such a
With
spill?
that logic, there's a risk of a spill of a gas tank as we're driving around our cars out here. Should we stop
Some
that?
would say that-
There's a risk of catching pneumonia by walking out in public. Maybe we should just stay at home. There's a risk of a business failure, so maybe we should do everything possible to make sure that no business ever fails in our state. There's risks everywhere. And what we get in this mode is that, and a lot of people on the left are famous for doing this. If you read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, they will find a target, fix it, polarize it, and make sure that everything that goes on about that is all about that. We see that with what's happening with our president right now. And I think this Line 5 issue has kind of gotten a bit of a life of its own. If there is malfeasance, don't get me wrong, we should prosecute. If they're violating the law in any way, shape, or form, or violating acceptable practices that go along with the contract that allow them to have the rights to go out and put pipeline under the straits, by all means hold them accountable. But to go off and start, I'm amazed we're talking about this here in Livonia, to tell you the truth.
Well, the Great Lakes affect us all.
Great Lakes affect us all, but I can tell you, we've got an issue with the Livonia transmission plant right now, right? So we've got vinyl chloride leak there. Why aren't we talking about that? Why aren't we talking about some other areas that are much more closer to home, instead of parroting what the Democrats want to talk about at a Livonia Republican club? It doesn't make sense.
Is there any other questions for the senator?
Please talk about some pro-life issues and how you would be different than our current government.
Well, the one key point of difference is that he vetoed my Choose Life license plate.
Yeah,
Right?
that was frustrating.
So, That's a point of difference. And I want everybody to be clear that the proceeds from that license plate, those proceeds were going to be going towards helping mothers who are facing unplanned pregnancies, providing them with the resources, a roof over their head, gas, diapers, all these things that people who are pro-abortion say that we don't care about because we just care about what happens at birth. No, we're trying to take care of them throughout their life. And the governor in his veto statement said that it was too divisive. And I gotta admit that the message of choose life is only divisive if you believe choose death is something that you want to defend. And so I was very disappointed in that. But, so there's a lot of other things. I've got a plan to defund Planned Parenthood. You know, when the Senate was, when right in the wake of that Center for Medical Progress discoveries that happened, where they had the undercover cameras and they were showing how Planned Parenthood was selling baby parts for profit, they formed a Senate Oversight Committee. And not much has been done there. So we've got this defund Planned Parenthood bill. We've defunded it in appropriations, which is like a one-year law. But we haven't done a permanent fix. My bill will be a permanent fix. So there's a lot of different areas on that we can delve into. But if you're a good friend of mine, David Barton, who's also endorsed me for governor, has often said that if you know where somebody stands on life, you know where they're going to stand on your personal property rights, you're going to know that they're going to stand on your Second Amendment rights, they know where you're going to stand on whether or not you want to mandate businesses to take specific behaviors or not, and they're going to go all up and down the line on it, and you can see whether or not they're conservative or not. Fact is, I've gotten most conservative rating in the Senate for 3 out of my 7 years of service, including the last 2 in a row, and a lot of it is based on the fact that I've stayed true to core principles like defending life.
Hello.
I'm not a Livonia resident, but I really care about what happens to our great state. The reason I'm here today is because I've been following Senator Colbeck around, listening to his speeches, and I've determined that he's the person who can save our state. My question is, and I'm actually here to pick up literature so I can start going around, you need name recognition.
Yeah.
You know, the other big dudes, they've got name recognition. So
Actually, I think I'm taller.
I'm learning literature to go around. I work in Livonia.
Yeah.
My patients don't know who you are. You're
Yeah.
the senator. So I'm going to start passing out literature in my office. I'm going to be going door to door, passing out literature, talking to my neighbors now, so we can get you on the ballot. So my question is, and my encouragement to everyone in this room, if you care about small government, we need to start getting Senator Colbeck's name recognized so we can get him on the ballot.
Are you saying that my appreciation for small government is translated into my marketing campaign? So no, we're working on getting the name recognition out. That's simply it. It's all about name recognition. Anything you can do to help on that is appreciated. But I'm going to put that in context too, and what the opportunity is for us, because when they started off this whole governor race, they didn't poll me on it, but they put out a poll back in June of last year, right after I had filed, so they had already polled before that. And they did a poll of the Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor, and Dr. Hines. The Attorney General was in the 20s, the Lieutenant Governor was in the teens, Dr. Hines is at 1%. 55% of the voters in that poll were undecided. Now, you can't tell me that there was an issue of name recognition with the Attorney General. There's no issue of name recognition with Lieutenant Governor. What it does tell you is that they saw what was on the shelf and they weren't buying. And that's why you're right, you're perfectly right. We got to get the word out. We've got a series of town halls that are going to be coming up. The fact that we've been endorsed by Sean Hannity, by Ted Cruz, by Bob Lutz, by David Barton, by astronaut Jack Lausma, and a few others, it shows we're starting to resonate. We got faith-based leaders all across the state, and a lot of people on the west side of the state as well, like Dave Agema, who's our former Republican National Committee man, our current grassroots vice chair, Mark Gurley. They're supporting us. So we're getting the traction, but this is, you remember It's a Wonderful Life with George Bailey? And he talks about rubbing that dollar bills and say, make some babies, you know? Well, we're trying to do that both on the finance side, but also on the get the word out. And so the good news is when we were gathering signatures, and everybody was here gathering signatures, we weren't paid, the people that were doing it weren't paid professionals just saying, give me the signature so I can get my $6. They were sitting there saying, give me a signature because this is a guy you want to go off and vote for in the next election. And so we were doing our canvassing already in that. So they just haven't been the ones that they've been polling so far in the phone calls. So thank you very much. Appreciate the help.
Any other questions for the senator?
There's one more thing I'd like to address. There's this peculiar notion that when you go to a university, you lose your constitutional right for free speech today.
Yeah.
And we've got to end that, because that's one of our fundamental things of our country, freedom of speech. How do you want to address that?
Well, I mean, I introduced a campus free speech bill that's currently sitting in Senate Judiciary. I was told that as soon as I get the ACLU on board with my bill, then this Republican committee will go off and have a hearing. Well, guess what? I got the ACLU on board with my bill.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and with the Goldwater Institute. So we've got, very conservative with very liberal, all on board with this, but it's not moving yet. And you know about what's going on with all the politics of people not serving the best interests of the people. That's blocking that right now. But if we get enough cry out there to go off and push for that, that is something I feel very important about. There's students that are actually being arrested for handing out pocket constitutions on campuses here in Michigan. And, that First Amendment right was not put in place to protect people from speech they don't like, right? Nobody needs a First Amendment to say, to keep somebody from saying, I love you. Nobody needs that for that. But when you actually have a difference of opinion, which is why I get in a little trouble right now and all this kerfuffle around committee assignments and everything, is because I'm actually talking about the policy issues that matter to the citizens of Michigan. Some people are focused on line 5, I understand that, but most of the other folks in the state are focused on jobs, they're focused on infrastructure, they're focused on education. That's what's driving people, and they're focused on making sure we got roads that we can drive on without falling through a crater or something. That's what most people are interested in, and I want to make sure that I have the opportunity to go off and talk about that, not just in my own district, but I got to win support for policy issues that I believe in all across the state. That's why I've gone around the state talking about free market health care, because if I want Medicaid expansion to go bye-bye, which Healthy Michigan is not so healthy, by the way, it's on its way out, because the savings it projected are not going to be realized. I wish somebody would have told them that. Because of that, I talk about these policy issues with both barrels. There are people that don't want you talking about the opposite side of a policy issue that's being promoted by the Senate Majority Leader or the Speaker. And that's not my job. I don't work for them. I work for you. And I make sure that they're clearly understanding that. So free speech isn't just on the college campuses. It happens in our own caucus. You can see it right now on the media networks playing out with President Trump. Are they talking about his accomplishments? No. Are they talking about some worn-out issue that CNN keeps propagating around Russian collaboration? Yeah, that's what they're focused on. They are not talking about what most people want to talk about, and that's the frustrating thing. So anyway, free speech is extremely important.
What about 1 year away, celebrate the 1 year anniversary of the inauguration of the president?
Yeah.
And I remember back when they, in the city of Detroit, they had a recount. And my wife and I actually participated in helping with that recount. And our ballot box was a mess. They couldn't count it. There was 50 ballots in a box that should have had 305 ballots in it, I think. And I remember hearing something about you turning in some voter irregularities to the AG's office. And have you ever heard anything from that?
Right in the wake of that, I sent in a letter saying, I asked the Attorney General and I asked the Secretary of State to go off and investigate to see if there were examples of voter fraud that occurred as a result of this election. Secretary of State actually followed up on that, did an investigation of just databases, and then did some investigation of election procedures. But in the database check, they found out that there were at least 31 counts of voter fraud that were identified. To date, we have had 0 prosecutions.
Something about the health department. I'm around vaccines. I don't understand how they can go above state statute to make people go get these waiver sessions. It's
Well, I introduced Senate Bill 299-300 to go off and make sure that they colored inside the lines and that they didn't treat parents that had a good conscious objection to getting their kids vaccinated for the stipulations that are already in statute that they shouldn't have to go through extra hoops and hurdles like go to a health department and get lectured for an hour on what bad parents they are. Now, there's some good news on that front. As of January 1st, 2018, they changed their form, and then they stopped violating FERPA by asking schools for data when they came back up there as well. So they are starting to color inside the lines because of pressure from folks. Our office has been pressuring them. Representative Barrett's been pressuring them. We've got groups for Michigan for Vaccine Choice. Now, however you feel on the vaccine issues, believe me, I'm not anti-vaccine. My wife's a pediatrician. Vaccines work. I mean, for a lot of cases. But for some people, they are highly sensitive to some of the issues inside of vaccines, and particularly with what they call adjuvants like aluminum and mercury that they use to stabilize vaccines. Well, young kids especially are very susceptible to permeability of mercury, and once it gets into the blood system, especially in the blood-brain barrier up here, it doesn't disappear very easily. And so some kids are more susceptible to that, some are not. But we need to be very careful, and if parents have a good conscious objection to that, or to the fact that some of these vaccines are actually developed by aborting human embryos, then that has to be, and there are ethical vaccines that are out there, but sometimes it's not financially expedient to go off and do that, if you know what I mean. So there are reasons for objections that need to be respected, and matter of fact, I'm in the middle right now of writing a rebuttal to an editorial that's put up by Detroit News on that right now, and as you can imagine, it's a real sensitive subject, because immediately, as soon as you say parents should have a choice, oh, you're anti-vaccine. No, that's not what I said. I said that, you know, just like most Republicans don't like being mandated to go off and have Obamacare, right? Most Republicans, it seems like we're promoting it here in the state of Michigan with the Medicaid expansion. But anyway, we shouldn't be forced to have a vaccine as well. This is a very slippery slope. Once the pharmaceutical companies realize they can mandate a certain drug is taken, you know, that creates a cottage industry for them of 300 million Americans. Of course they're going to go off and try to use the government affairs liaison to go off and mandate if there's any degree of certainty, which is why the concern with what Dillon was talking about, well, if there's any risk, should we go off and approach it? Well, you know, this is what leads to this. Life is all about managing risks, and you have to be rational about how you go off and approach that. There's bad stuff that can happen on a lot of different fronts, but ultimately in our country we have to recalibrate back to basic principles, core principles. And one of those core principles is that the powers not granted to the government are retained by the people, and this is a case in point.
Yeah, we have to have the freedom to say if someone's going to inject us with something or not. It's
right.
Unbelievable.
Right. So,
All right.
I got to get hitting the road here, but thank you guys very much. I'm sorry, I got
Thank you, Senator
a
Colbeck.
tour here. Appreciate it.